Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new project. This is going to be the boss project, so to speak, if you want to compare it to a video game, because it is going to be the most complex and it is going to be a project that we can proudly deploy because it is going to include a full-end front-end feature, a full-end back-end feature, as well as a database. And all this is going to be hosted in the cloud. So what is this application? Well, it is a very simple notes application. So over here, once we go to localhost 3000, we get presented with this landing screen right over here, asking us to put our email and password. We also have the ability to sign up if we want to. But right now, as you can see, it's telling us to sign in, assuming we already have an account. So you can go ahead and just put in your email and password. Now, all this data is going to be stored inside of our database. So let's say you go ahead and you put in rubbish. Well, our front end is going to make a request to the back end, and then the back end is going to give us an invalid login credential, something like so. Now, however, if you do log in with a correct email and password, I actually used my real email for this, so I did this beforehand. You can see that we get presented with this page right over here, which just allows me to look at my notes. So you can see here that these are my notes. Let me just go ahead and sign in again. You can see these are my notes over here. These are all the different things that I have noted. And now I can also have this logout feature right over here. Now this is always going to persist. So this is right here always going to persist because all this data is stored in the database. So if I refresh and I go to my notes, you can see here that all this is going to persist. And I also have the ability to add another note. So I can just add whatever it is that we want here, and it will add to the bottom. Now, if I were to log out and I were to go to a different account, then I wouldn't see these particular notes because those notes are associated to a user. Okay, so that's pretty much it. The design of this obviously doesn't look all too great. We're going to work on the design a little bit better in our application, but you guys get the premise of this. So let's just go ahead and talk about exactly all the different things that we're going to be learning. So the first thing that we're going to learn is authentication, how we can handle authentication in a Nux application. The second thing is we're going to be integrating with a backend as a service called Supabase. So we're not really going to build our server ourselves. We're going to be integrating with something like Supabase, which is very similar to Firebase if you're familiar with that. And it's very, very commonly used, so it's a good thing to learn. And then we're going to learn about SQL databases. Supabase uses SQL databases and allows us to save data there. And then we're going to learn about middleware. So this is a very important topic that we haven't discussed thus far, but we will learn about it in this section. So super excited, and let's get on into it. In this video, what we're going to do is work on the landing page. Specifically, we're going to work on those forms that are going to allow us to log in or log out. Now, as per usual, I created a Nux application, a boilerplate Nux application for this. Again, as a quick reminder, let me zoom in here, zoom out. As a quick reminder, in order to create a Nux app, npx nuxi init, whatever your app name is, I called it Notes or 06 Notes app. That's what I called it. Then you got to move into the application. So whatever you called it, let's say you called it Notes. Then you do an npm install to install all the dependencies, and then an npm run dev, and you should see this application running. So over here, this is where we are going to be building our, boilerplate landing page. But we're going to have multiple pages throughout our application. So let's reorganize the way that we have our pages by creating a pages directory. And then in here, I'm going to create an index.view. Everything in the app.view, I'm just going to put in the index.view. So everything here, I'm going to put it right there. And then the app.view file, let's just remove it because we're going to have multiple pages. If I refresh, we should see the exact same thing. Let's go here. There we go. Looking good. So now what I want to do is I want to remove this as I did. And I want to create that wonderful form that allows us to either sign in or sign up or sign in. So log in or sign up. You guys know what I mean. So log in, we already have an existing account and we just want to give them the credentials, whereas sign up is we don't have an account, we want to create one. I don't know if you guys needed me to define that, but I'm sure you guys knew it, but whatever. Nonetheless, let's just be specific so I can get those 5 stars. All right, so let's begin by creating a component for this. And I'm going to go over here. Remember how to create components. We're going to say components. And then over here, I'm just going to say auth. So auth. So we're going to have an auth directory. And then I'm going to say card.view, like so. So any authentication stuff is going to live right here inside of this auth directory. And we should really only have this card, but well, nonetheless, let's just put it in here because now if we want to utilize that component, in order to use it, we're going to say auth card, like so. We could have called this sign up or sign in, but actually this card is going to handle both. So that's why I just called it auth in general. Okay, so let's just go ahead and grab this template. And let's just say hello for now, just to see if it renders correctly. And if I were to refresh, you can see it does not render correctly. We do not see it indeed. So let's just remove this, just see if, there we go. Okay, looking good. And then if I were to do that, we don't see it. I'm not actually 100% sure why that is. Let's just go here and let's just create an H1. Maybe let's make it more profound because we have a components directory. In the components, and we spelled components correctly, in the components we have this auth directory, and then in the auth directory we have a card file. So we should be able to say auth card, auto import that in, and we should see it here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to restart my server because it could be just a mistake between the server. So let's just go here. So fail to resolve component. If this is a native component, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to go ahead and just restart my server. And I'm going to refresh this. There we go. Okay. So just something went wrong with, I don't know what went wrong. Just restart your server anytime. Something seems like it should work, but it doesn't. Okay, there we go. So now we have our card. Looking great. Now what I want to do is I actually want to install that library. So that Nux UI library, so it can have some of those, end cards. So I'm going to say here npm install, and then I'm going to say at Nux, and then /UI like so. So let's go ahead and install that, and then we need to go over here inside of our Nux config and define it as a module so we can use it throughout our app. So I'm going to say at Nux, and then over here /UI. There we go. Let's go ahead and save that. Now in here, what we can do now is just say n card, and then over here n card like so. And let's just say hello or whatever. And now there we go. Now we see this wonderful card. Okay, so let's go over to our index.view file. And I'm going to add a little bit of styling here. So let's just go here. Let's add some styling. Let's make sure it is nice and scoped. Now I am going to create another div here. And this is where we're going to place the card. Over here, I'm going to give this a class of container. And then over here, I'm going to give this container a max width of 50%. So if I were to refresh here, you can see now it's 50%. And then I am going to, and you can honestly style this however way you want. I'm using a relatively big screen, so if this looks kind of awkward for you guys can increase it yourself. Again, this is not really a styling course. This is just more of a Nux course. So I'm going to say margin 0 auto, just to have it nice and centered. And I think this is looking a-okay. Now for the container itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say display flex. And I'm going to align everything in the center. So I'm going to say justify content center, and then align items center, like so. And there we go. And then we need to also give it a height of, let's give it a height of 100 VH. So you can see here, the height of this whole container is going to be the height of your screen. And now this is just nicely centered right in the middle. Looking good. Okay. So now what we can do is we can actually go back over here, and then inside of the end card, we can have an H3. And of course, we're going to change this up a little bit later, but we can say log in. Now this can either be log in or sign up. So let's remember that. And now over here, we're going to have the input. And the input, we're going to have two inputs, one for the email, one for the password. So we're going to say placeholder. You could even have a label for this, but whatever. Let's just keep it like this. I'm going to say email, like so. There we go, looking good. And then placeholder, or we're going to say password for this. All right, looking not that good, but whatever. Now let's go over here and let's do some styles. So I'm going to say, let me just go ahead and copy this here. And let's paste that in there. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to say card. So we're going to give this card itself some styling. So I'm going to say card. And let's give it a little bit of padding. And we'll say padding of 2 rems. See if that, I think 1 rem is fine. There we go. Looking good. The header itself. So let's just say card H3. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So let's just say font size of 2 rems. See how that looks. Looking maybe a little bit too big. Let's just say 1.5 for this. And there we go. Looking great. So now we have these email inputs. So what I want to do is let's actually wrap these inputs inside of a div. Just so we can have better styling here. Because right now you can see that they're side by side. I don't like that. So I'm just going to say here, give this a class of inputs container. Inputs container. And we're just going to grab this. Let's give that some style. Let's say display flex. And then flex direction. So flex direction is going to be column. So now they're nice and you can see vertical. Now the inputs themselves, let's actually give those a little bit of styling as well. So let's go here. And then over here, we're going to say input. And then what I'm going to do is just make this, give this a width of 10 rem. So it can be nice and big. Let's give it a margin bottom of, let's say 1 rem. So there's a little bit of spacing between the two. Maybe even 0.3 rems. There we go. Looking good. Looking good. The last little thing is the card itself. Let's just make it a little bit wider. So let's make this one 10 rems like this. I guess that's too small. Let's say 40 rems. All right. Let's just play around with it until we get the right one. 25 rems. I think that looks pretty good. So we got the email. We got the email. We got the password. Over here now what we can do is just make this, get rid of this whole width, and then hopefully it can be 100% as it is right now. And maybe we can increase the size of this just to make it look a little bit better. All right, log in. And then the last thing we need is the button. So let's just go over here. Let's just use the built-in button. So I'm going to say N button. And then let's close this off and button. And then let's just say here, login, something like that. There we go. I mean, not the prettiest form in the world, of course, but hey, nonetheless, it does the job. Maybe over here inside of the input, we can add a little bit of padding as well. So 0.2 rems of padding. So that looks a little bit better. So it's not like too spaced out. And then also maybe we can do an outline of none, and then a border of 0.1 rem solid, and then let's just do gray, like so. All right. Okay, looking good, I guess. The gray itself is a little bit too gray, so maybe we can just say RGBA, and then we can say something like this. And this should be probably 0, 0, 0. And let's refresh. Okay, let's change the opacity here. There we go. Now let's just give it a border radius of let's say 0.2 rems. Okay, so this is looking pretty okay to me. We can work maybe a little bit more on the styling, but in the next video, what I want to do is I kind of want to make this dynamic. I want to add the ability to either make this a sign up form or a login form. So maybe right over here in the bottom, it's going to say, oh, I don't have an account, create an account. So I can just click on that and we can toggle between the two. In this video, what we're going to do is add the ability to toggle from a login state to a sign up state. So let's go over here, and in the very bottom right here, I'm going to add a paragraph, and this is going to be a dynamic paragraph. I'm going to say for now, I don't have an account. I'm going to say something like don't have an account and account. I'm going to say here, create one now. Create one now, like this. So right here, we're going to have this, this thing. And then let's just go ahead and style this ourselves as well. So I'm going to say here, p tag. And then I'm going to say color. Usually the color of this is kind of like blue. And then the font size is a little bit smaller. So let's just say 0.5 rems, like so. Yeah, something like that. And let's also give it a cursor pointer so people know they can click on it. Cursor pointer, like so. All right, so this is looking pretty good. Maybe we can even just make it aqua just to make it look a little bit nicer. So aqua. There, no, blue. Blue. There we go. Okay. So now what we need to do is when we click on this, we need to somehow toggle this into a login state. So, of course, what we need here is state. We need some state management inside of this component. So let's add a script here. And let's just say script setup lang is equal to TypeScript. And I'm going to say here, I'm going to say auth state for this. Are we in login or are we in not login? So I'm going to say ref. And initially, I'm going to say we are in a login state. And I'm actually going to type this as either the string login, or it's going to be the string sign up. So we can't change it to one or the other. So we have some nice typing here. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. So right now, initially, it is login. And we can, of course, add an enum here, but I'm just going to type it with a string. Now, what we're going to do is once we click on this, what we want to do is we want to change this to sign up. So let's add a handler here, and I'm going to say const, let's just say here, toggle auth state. And then over here, I am going to say if the auth state dot value is equal to, so if that's equal to login, then we're going to change it to sign up. So I'm going to say if it's equal to login, then the auth state dot value is going to now equal to sign up, like so. Now else, so the only else case is that if it's sign up, so we're going to just switch it to login. So I'm going to say auth state, this time it's going to be login, like so. All right, so that's pretty much it. So over here now, what we can do is we can just call this function. So we can call this function at click. So at click, let's just call this toggle auth state function. And just to prove that it works, let's just go over here. Maybe we can actually make this nice and capital, might as well, because we can even use it in the You know what, we'll leave it as is, and we'll just style it a little bit differently. So over here, let's just we'll call it auth state, like so. And let's go over here. And then over here, I'm gonna just display the auth state. So initially we are login. If I click on this, now we're gonna sign up, log in, sign up, log in. Looking good. So over here, this H3, we're just gonna do some text decoration here. So H3, where is that? I'm gonna say text decoration. I'm gonna say capitalize, like so. All right, let's refresh this. Or I believe it's not text decoration, it's text transform. And there we go. So now you can see that that is looking good. So the button, I think for the button itself, we're just gonna call it submit. And for this now, we're gonna have to change the message. So over here, what we can say is, so we can just do a ternary operator. So we can say if auth state is equal to, let's say, login, then we are going to render this string. Else, we're going to render, so this is if it's login. Well, you want to check if you don't have an account, then you can move on to sign up. But if you are in a sign up state, you can say already have an account. Well, go ahead and log in, something like that. All right, so now we can go over here, and now you can see that the message changes as well. So already have an account, go ahead and log in, which allows us to go to this login state. All right, so that's pretty much all it is that we need to do. But now let's actually handle the login. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting and where we're gonna have to start integrating with Supabase. We created this wonderful form that allows us to toggle between login as well as sign up. However, we obviously haven't implemented the logic. Right now, this isn't really functional. Now, authentication logic is notoriously difficult and complicated. Just to show you exactly what we would have to do, let's say for sign up, what we would have to do is implement these steps right over here. So the first thing that we would have to do is send the email and the password from our front end to our back end. So this email, this password. Now, once the back end gets the email as well as the password, then there's a bunch of other steps it needs to do. The first thing that it needs to do is it needs to validate the email as well as the password. It needs to validate that the email is actually a valid email and not something like this. And the password is, let's say, has a minimum length of 5 or whatever it is that we want to set it to. Now, once this validation is done, well, then we're going to move on to another validation. So we're trying to sign up, so we're assuming this email doesn't exist in our database. If it does, then what we want to do is we want to throw an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab that email, check if it already exists in our database. If it already exists in our database, that means you already have an account with this email. So we're going to throw an error, and of course, the client needs to handle this. Now, if it passes this validation, then what we want to do is store the email inside of our database, which isn't really a trivial thing. So we're going to have to figure out a way to store this email as well as the password in our DB. And actually, the password itself, we can't even store it as plain text. What we're going to have to do is hash the password. So we need some sort of hashing algorithm so we can store it in our DB. And that's just going to ensure if somebody gets access to our DB, we're not storing password in plain text. So that's just another step, another complicated step. And then afterwards, what we have to do is return a token to the front end that just tells the front end that, hey, yes, you are authenticated. Now, this is relatively complicated, and thankfully, we're not going to do anything when it comes to this because we are going to be using a service called Supabase. And this is essentially a backend as a service. So it does all of the backend stuff for us, including database management as well as authentication. All we really have to do is just call a function, pass in the email as well as the password, and it is going to do all of these steps for us. We don't even have to do it ourselves. And that's why Supabase is so great. And again, it is very similar to Firebase. You can see here it's an open source Firebase alternative. Very, very similar to it, except the main difference, there's a few differences, but Firebase, for its database, it uses a NoSQL database, whereas Supabase uses a SQL database, which is Postgres, which I really enjoy. So let's actually get started with Supabase. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and sign in. Now you can only sign in with a GitHub account. So go ahead and do that. If you don't have a GitHub account, you're going to have to create it. That's the only way you can really sign in. So go ahead and sign in, relatively simple. And then once you sign in, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. You should see this page over here. Now, if you are new to Supabase, you probably have no projects. I have this one project over here called Nux. Now, over here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new project to this organization, which is just myself. Now, over here, I'm going to call this project Notes app. And then we're going to give our password. We're going to give our database a password. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to give it a password like so. You know what? Let's give it a nice strong password. You're not really going to have to remember this, but it's fine. Let's just add an exclamation mark. Okay, looking good. Come on. Oh my goodness, this is... Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write some gibberish right over here. I'm going to go ahead and paste this gibberish and paste it in there. I'm not going to use this anyways. And let's go over here, and I am going to... let's go over here, and right here in the Nux config, I'm just going to store this password. Doesn't matter if you guys see it, because I'm probably going to delete this project a little bit later on. Okay, and then for the pricing plan, of course, we're going to use the free tier. So let's go ahead and create this project. Now, this project is going to take a little bit of time to create. So once it creates, I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, my good friends, this is going to be a relatively quick video. I went ahead and I created this, and everything is up and running. You can see now we have our Notes application. Over here, we can see we have this authentication tab that's going to be dealing with everything regarding authentication. Here is our storage. This is where we're going to have our SQL database that is already hosted for us. But what we want to do now is we want to connect our Nux application to Supabase. So go over here to the home screen, and what you need to do is scroll down right over here, and where it says Project API Keys, I want you to go to the service role and reveal this particular key. So this is a very important key in order to connect to your app. So this should be a secret, and again, I'm showing this and exposing this to you guys because I'm going to delete this later, but this is something that you should never share publicly. So what I'm going to do now is, in order to connect to Supabase, I'm going to create a composable for this. So I'm going to say here, composables, and then right over here, I'm going to create a new composable called use Supabase, like so. And as per usual, I'm going to create a function for this composable. So I'm going to say const, and then I'm going to call this function use Supabase, like so. And then of course what we're going to need to do is also export default use Supabase. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a few constants. I'm going to call this the Supabase key. So Supabase underscore key, like this. And I'm going to say that this is equal to the string that I just copied. Again, we're just going to leave this like that for now. The next thing that we need to do is, well, we need to connect to our API. So we have the key. This is good. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into API right over here. And this just shows us a way that we can connect to the Supabase API through our application, whether it's Nux, whether it's whatever. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to install at Supabase /Supabase.js. So that's the first thing that we need to do. So we need to install this. So let's install this on our local machine. Let's get rid of this, Let's just go here and say npm install -- save add supabase --supabase.js. So let's go ahead and install that. And then these are the steps that we have to do. So the first thing we have to do is import create client from the Supabase package that we just installed. Then we need to grab the Supabase URL, which is stated for us right over here. So let's just copy that. And then over here, let's just say const Supabase URL, and that's equal to this right over here, this string that was provided to us. And then what we need to do is grab the Supabase key, which is something we shouldn't share. That's why they have it in a process .env, an environment variable. Again, we'll work on that a little bit later. But then all we have to do is do const Supabase is equal to create client. And then over here, we pass in the URL and then the key. So that's really all it is that we have to do. So inside of the composable, what I'm going to do is say const Supabase is equal to create client. And then over here, I'm going to pass it with the Supabase key. And then over here, I'm going to grab the Supabase URL. Again, we're hard coding them here for now, which is fine. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, of course, the last thing that we need to do is also import create client from the Supabase package that we have just installed. And that's pretty much it. So the last thing that I'm going to do is just return Supabase, so Supabase. And now, anytime we need to do anything regarding Supabase, whether it is authentication or adding something in our DB, we can just grab this Supabase that is connected to our app, something like this. Let me go ahead and show you. So we can go over here. Let's say we need to, let me go ahead and just add a script tag. I'll just grab everything here and then paste it here. And let's say we need access to Supabase in order to authenticate somebody or add something into the DB. Well, we all know how composables work. We can just say use Supabase like this. We can grab Supabase. So we can grab Supabase, and then we can start doing stuff with it. Something like supabase.auth.sign-in. We'll talk about all of these other things later. But just to double check that everything is working a-okay, let's just go ahead over here and render Supabase just into our app. And this should be an object with a bunch of methods. So let's go here, and there we go. You can see we have a bunch of different methods that we can actually utilize in order to perform actions on this new project. So this is looking terrific. You can see here we have like the current user, stuff like that. So now let's actually move on to, well, the authentication portion of this section. So let's actually use Supabase to create and authenticate our users.